Okay, let's go. So I want you to imagine it's 2018, 2019. It's a rainy January night in Manchester, England, and Dame Sonia Boyce has just taken the unthinkable step of asking the Manchester Art Gallery to remove their famous John William Waterhouse painting. Now, the painting, known as the Hylas and Nymph, was part of an experiment for one of quite a renowned gallery in the UK. And the artwork was taken down for 7 days. And that 7 days, it broke the internet and a whole online pylon began because of the fact that this piece was taken down. Social media was electric with outrage, cries of censorship. How can they take this piece of work down? How dare they do such a thing? People within the sector and art critics and curators all were disgusted. Would Picasso be off the walls next because of the fact that they took down this piece of work for 7 small days? The Renowned Gallery took down this image for 7 days, which really broke the internet, and the online pylon really began, as I was saying. So social media was outraged. There was a cries of censorship and cries of abuse and how shouldn't be allowed to be done. As I said, Jonathan Jones is a well-known art critic within the UK, and would Picasso be off the walls next? And there was such a fake outrage was kind of really brewing online. And if you can imagine, this is from the critics and from so-called curators and people within the sector. You can imagine what the online pylon looked like afterwards. One Oxford professor said it's close to a similar thing to what the Nazis used to do, how they used to take down work because it conflicted with their political aims and tastes. As you can imagine, this was exhausting. It was tiring, it was a lot, it was overwhelming, and most importantly, it was wrong. Hi everybody, so my name is Hayden Karodis. I am a social media and digital marketing strategist. I've worked with 350 different arts and culture organizations across the UK and the USA. And one of those organizations is the organization called The Space, who created this really good online abuse in the arts and how to prepare and respond toolkit. And ultimately, this is the foundation for this session today, which I've based it on. So I've done quite a lot of work with The Space. There's loads of different webinars and sessions that I've done with them that you can watch online as well if you want to do some more further research into online abuse and how to kind of navigate it and how to deal with it. So what we're going to kind of focus on today is what to expect in today's society, how to use online and how to kind of navigate trolls or being abused online. So we're going to look at understanding the scope and impact of online abuse. We're going to think about and look at real life case studies and insights from the Space report. Then we're going to look at some strategies that you can use to protect yourself, to protect your staff, to really get your institution thinking about how they create frameworks that will allow them to function online in a space that we have to be on, but also we know there can be issues. So look at the scope and impact of that abuse. So the main thing that I want to look at today, there are four key kind of images and issues that come up when you think about online abuse. Sorry. The first one is freedom of expression. So it's shrinking. People are scared to speak about their work or to create work, and almost 50% of all artist organizations felt less safe to share their work online because of the impact of online abuse and hate. Women are more impacted. Female respondents self-censor more due to their fear of online attacks. Then there's widespread fear of abuse. So 69% of artists and organizations believe there's a fear of backlash that limits the kind of work that they can do. But for me, the biggest and most telling piece of data and insight from this post was the fact that only 17% of respondents knew how to respond to online abuse. And that's something that I'm assuming why everybody's here today is because the fact that there's a real lack of understanding of how do we actually prepare ourselves for if scenarios occur. What steps can we take as an organization? What steps can we take as a professional? What steps can we take as a business or a curator or artist as such? So I've got a question for everybody, and let's put the answers in the comments, or if you've got a really telling story, do feel free to jump on. How many people in this session currently have clear guidelines on how to respond to the online abuse at their institution? I can't see the comment section, so someone let me know. Oh, here they are. Okay. No, so I see somebody said no. Okay. Anybody else? 80%. That's good. Well, that's good. That's a good percentage confidence. That's good. No, it's had clear guidelines. Okay, that makes sense. So I got another question too. How many people would know what steps to take if they were receiving online hate as an individual? See, it can be really hard to even think where to start, where to begin, because of the fact that online can be quite intimidating if not worked properly. So hopefully throughout this conversation and throughout this session, I'll show you some really good ways to really kind of navigate that. Okay, so we're going to start with a story time. So in 2016, Yumna al-Reshi published Northern Yemen, which was a body of work that basically portrayed powerful women from Yemen in st really stunning landscapes. And the women were covered in hijabs and their traditional clothing and had them resembling superheroes. And it was like it was done intentionally. It was a protest against the negative portrayal of Muslim women in Western media. And as you can imagine, the post went viral. And while much of the response was positive, there was a disturbing pattern that some people were just simply outraged by the idea of a strong Muslim woman. Comments accused her of being irresponsible, as if Muslim women should only be seen as oppressed. And at first, she tried to ignore the criticism, but it escalated, becoming more aggressive, more relentless, and more terrifying. It got so bad that someone actually found her inbox. First, her inbox was filled with death and unfortunately rape threats. Someone even found her home address and sent a Google Map screenshot telling her to watch where she sleeps. All because of the fact that she had a post that showed women in a powerful position or looking powerful and owning their owning how they were perceived online. So this led to self-censorship. And Yemena lost, not only did she lose her creative ability because she used online as a space to share information and to share her work and to build her career, but she lost a way to earn work, earn a living. And this was all because of the fact she was bombarded with abuse and hate and death threats and worse. And regardless of your political leanings or your thoughts on the world currently, this idea of self-censorship is going to become more, is going to come up more and more as the world starts to change and the winds to politically start to change. We've already seen stuff like this where people, green card holders are being deported for their freedom of speech. So we're living in a world where we have to be prepared to be able to know how to navigate when scenarios occur, regardless of where you sit on any issue. We have to be in a place where we're prepared and we understand what that looks like for us, but not just for you as an individual, but also the cultural organization that you may be working with. So how do we identify and define abuse? So there are seven mostly forms of online abuse that cultural organizations on the whole tend to go through. So they tend to be cyber stalking, hate speech, and doxing. So cyber stalking is that kind of persistent harassment online from individuals. Hate speech is the one that maybe most people are more aware of. So that's attacks based on your identity, race, gender, religion, etc. Doxing is something that is really new, and that's not new, but that seems to be happening more and more, where people are sharing your private contact details and addresses and your phone number, and people are abusing that scenario and taking advantage and calling you and contacting you and sending you private messages and stuff of that nature, which must be terrifying. You're now getting things like impersonations, cyber abuse, spamming, virtual mobbing. Impersonations, for example, this week alone, especially with AI, I saw a video of LeBron James speaking. And it was only until I was about 10, 15 seconds into the video, because of the things he was saying, I realized, hang on, this isn't a real video. So impersonations are getting more and more sophisticated, and they're probably going to get better in quotation marks. So we have to be careful of the information we're putting out there and how people perceive us, and then find ways to be able to protect ourselves. Cyber abuse and harassment, so targeted bullying and trolling that often happens to cultural organizations. I've got a friend in the UK who now runs the Vagina Museum, and they often get cyber and abuse because of some of the content they put out, even though there's nothing on their content that should be provocative. They teach educational content, and they're often receive abuse and harassment. Spamming, where people flood your channels with unwanted messages, or virtual mobbing. So people who have influence tend to have this, where they can send their fans to come and attack your page, or maybe there's activist group of some kind that have decided to um, send loads of their audience or their fans to attack a page or attack a museum or to um, target people specifically. So I want to ask, so after just reading that, the kind of the story about Yumina, I have got a question for everybody. Which of these forms of abuse do you think applies to her experience? Some of what we've just covered here. And does anybody have any of their own examples of that they may have encountered with any of these seven different types of online abuse or issues? I think there's one I see here. Oh, here we go. So we haven't addressed online abuse in our museum since we dealt with a very volatile, hot button topic, slavery in America. We do receive practical guidance for dealing in depth, in-person conversation, but not online abuse. I think we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but when you're thinking about what online abuse looks like, there's a middle ground between abuse, freedom of speech, and genuine conversations. And that can be hard to understand where that line is, but we'll talk about how you can look at that. Threats to doxing with threats of knowing where they are. I think that to me, that is one of the scariest things. And again, there are certain steps we can take, and we have to kind of be um, more, more open to how we deal with online and what information we put on and how we protect ourselves. So I'll move on. Oops, no. So what are the steps that we can take to protect ourselves? So step one, speak with your team. Step two, set up moderations and escalation frameworks. Step three, implement platforms and security best practices. So what do some of these steps look like? So with step one, when you're speaking with your team, you need to be very clear with who manages your online presence and public facing content. Who are your key decision makers and for crisis response? What internal policies exist or need to be created? So when we look at who manages your online presence, these are the people that you need to speak to because they're the people who will be receiving a lot of the issue, a lot of the messaging or the spamming or the comments on a daily basis. I've worked with social media professionals who again back in the UK, who said she got so used to seeing the comments that it made her numb to it. And the issue that you come to this is then that you now start to get to a position where can you even gauge what is good for your audience to see because you become so numb to some of the commentary that you receive. So there needs to be some clear guidelines so that your team knows, okay, this is what we deem okay, and this is what we deem offensive, or this is what we decided that we need to have a comment on. Who are your key decision makers? So there needs to be clarity on if somebody's on the front line, who do they escalate this problem to? How do we save this information? Where do we save it? Do we have to create a templates and processes that allow us to put this to the side so that we know that we can report ongoing abuse and we've got the evidence of it should we need it? Do we need to take photos, screenshots, all of that kind of information? What internal policies exist or need to be created? So when you have these internal policies, how are they shared with the team? Which team members are they shared with? Are they shared across the organization? Are they shared as part of your onboarding? Is it just your comms team who sees it? And that just your comms team is a really interesting part because, and we'll touch on it a little bit later, because you'll be so shocked at how much other people who have nothing to do with your comms also get affected by some of the work, some of these issues. Step two, set up moderation and escalation frameworks. So define what is acceptable, what is clear, clear your social media, be clear on your social media guidelines. So when I say define what's acceptable, and I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, is there's a saying that you can start with, if it wouldn't be acceptable in person, in real life, then it's not acceptable online. So if you wouldn't tolerate it in real life, in your museum, in your organization, in face-to-face, then it's probably unacceptable online. And then you can work backward from there, depending on what your cultural organization stands for, what your ethoses are, what your takes are on freedom of speech, on different subject matters. You can then work your way backward from there. It's not easy, but there has to be a balance between critique versus harassment. Is it fair debate or is it targeted abuse? And again, there is a line, but without there being clear guidelines, it makes it harder for your team on the front line to actually deal with it, because it becomes a case of personal opinion, and that can lead to more issues and can lead to more trouble online, and can lead to more pylons. So there needs to be clear mandates or clear community guidelines that are there for your team to refer to and know what to do to take next steps. And the same goes to developing escalation processes. So who responds? When do you respond? How do you respond? So for example, do you say, if you've got a clear community guidelines, if somebody says something that you feel doesn't align with your community guidelines, you can then say, here's our online community guidelines, put a link to it. This is why we're doing this, taking these steps. Please read our online community guidelines, or we will take the following steps. Maybe you'll be the sort of organization that says, who likes to respond with a pre-prepared statement. So maybe you've got a pre-prepared statement that you can put up. Whatever that looks like for you, you have to be clear on what it looks like for you and what works best for your team and what you're trying to achieve as a cultural organization. And then step 3, implement platform and security best practices. Now, this can apply to personal accounts as well, but this is looking at it from the standpoint of an organization. Who can comment on your posts? Who can tag you? Who can message your team? Who has those access? What are the privacy settings on your social media channels? What are the settings on your forum, on your website, maybe? Be clear about what this looks like. What email addresses are public facing? Just be clear of what this looks like. How are your team using social media? Is it on their personal phones, or is it on a work phone? If it's on a work phone, they can put the work phone down at the end of the day, and they don't have to receive the bombardment if it's happening outside of work hours, for example. Social monitoring. So how do you track negative sentiment and react in real time? So I'll give you an example of this. So for example, again, regardless of where you may sit on the political ideas or the thoughts of it, the Brooklyn Museum currently have a few topical issues. So there's a few things that they might not want to create content around that might stoke more issues, or more trolling, or more abuse, or more commentary that is inappropriate. So you have to be clear about what the perception is of your organization, or what the perception is of the person you're working with. And if you are clear on what that is, you can either prepare yourself and create guidelines and steps to deal with it, or you can make sure you're not putting out content that might trigger people or might get people to start any kind of abuse. And then training staff on digital security and how to handle abuse. Have you trained your staff on what that looks like? So it might be a case of your social team, maybe they're only allowed online for a specific amount of time. So they're only allowed online for a specific amount of time. If they receive something that is particularly harrowing or particularly detrimental or scary or upsetting, they're allowed to take 15 minutes, half an hour away from the desk and go through whatever that may look like for you as a team. Make sure that the staff understand what it looks like. Make sure the staff understand how they can block comments. Make sure the staff understand how they can report to the platforms, things of that nature. So we can go back into another story time. So we're going to look again at the Manchester Gallery. So let's take a look back at the story of Sonia Boyce and the Manchester Gallery of Art. So in an article in a UK paper called The Guardian, Sonia said the following: her first instinct was to go and hide. And not because it felt remorseful, but because there was a real level of anger and vitriol that was really unhealthy. And their desire to bash women in the public space was very strongly felt. All because of the fact that they decided to take down a painting for 7 days. And what we have to understand is this was during the time of just at the beginning, or the beginning to the middle part of the Me Too movement. There was horrible cultural wars going on. So people just jump onto issues. And there is something as cultural organizations and as professionals, have an understanding of what the landscape looks like and how is the world perceiving things at the moment. This doesn't mean you don't put out the work. It just means you have an understanding of what the world looks like and how culture is reacting to things, so that you can be prepared and put things in place to prepare yourself and your team. So what happened to the gallery? So the curator of the Manchester Art Gallery, Claire Ganaway, said the gallery was bombarded by every form of communication. They received letters, emails, phone calls, media requests, posts on social media. Verbal comments were made to staff working in the gallery itself. There were calls for resignations. Their behavior was compared to extremist regimes. Dark things were sent to the team by post that were clearly intended to unsettle them. So these are all things simply because somebody took down a painting. At the peak of the incident, it really impacted people in every part of the organization because the story went viral so quickly. So due to the volume of letters, calls, etc., for the next few days, everybody in the organization had to get involved and try to help fend off all of it. And this is something that I spoke to about mentioned earlier. Sometimes it's not just your digital team or your comms team, it's everybody involved. And it only got worse. So someone found Claire's relatives' details and they threatened them. This is how extreme it got. The gallery's front of house team also found themselves on the receiving end of verbal abuse about the project. And then this last piece, which to me is also so very important, it kind of touches back on what I mentioned about culture and how culture is perceived, is in almost all of the reporting, a lot, if not all of the context of the event had been shown from the story, including that it was always intended to be a temporary removal of the painting. So I say this to say that even though the point of the exhibition had nothing to do with censorship, it was all the point, and it was in the press release, and it was completely clear in the press release and all of the communications from the organization, people didn't care. The internet thrives on misunderstanding outrage culture. And then you think about the fact that there were art critics and people within who were deemed as academics who all chimed in on the issue that just amplified the misinformation in the first place and made it go even further. So institutions must prepare for misrepresentation and backlash when they're doing their planning for any exhibit or any campaign. Crisis planning should be a vital part of your content strategy. So when you're creating your content, you should be thinking about, okay, what are the potential backlashes that could happen from this, and how do we prepare for this? This doesn't make it a good thing. I'm just saying we have to find ways to prepare so that we can actually be ready for it when it comes, or when or if it happens. So there's some key questions you should be asking your team. Does your organization review content for risk before posting? Do you have social media monitoring in place? Have staff been trained to handle online abuse? These are the questions you need to be asking your team if you're going to think about creating templates or processes to get involved. So have you thought about how you the risk before posting? What does that mean? Does that mean, what does the content look like? What's the campaign? Do we have risk assessments? What's the subject matter? Is the subject matter an issue in our state? Is the subject matter an issue around the world somewhere? How is our audience going to perceive this? Are there audiences who are going to target us because of this? These are the things you kind of need to be considering when you're creating these campaigns. Do you have social media monitoring in place? So again, simply what I said to you earlier with the Brooklyn Museum example. Are you monitoring what the language of the internet is currently, what the culture of the internet is at that moment in time? And then if you're an individual, there are key questions you need to ask yourself. So what is your personal information that is available about yourself online? And what question, how many people, and this is not from a vanity standpoint, but how many people have Googled themselves and actually sees what comes up when they type their name in? Let me know in the comments. So yes, Sarah said it's a lot. Tamara said you have. So you'll be shocked at how much information you can find about yourself online. And there are steps that if you're in the public eye, or if you don't want to be in the public eye, that you can take to try and remove some of this information about yourself. If you're somebody who wants to have a personal brand or be online, maybe consider having two different, if you're going to have social pages, have two different accounts. One private account that nobody has access to, and maybe it's a different name or whatever you want to use, and one account that has only information that you want out there in the world, including the email addresses that you put on it or that you sign up for, how you've got the privacy setting so that your email address isn't visible, all of those kind of things. Are your social media settings adjusted for safety? As annoying as social media is and can be, and that's coming from somebody who's a lover of the topic, there are a lot of safety precautions and procedures you can take. You just have to kind of really dig into them on the back end of a platform. But you can make sure that people can never tag you. You can make sure that certain keywords can't be posted on your page. You can make sure that your location is never shared. You can make so there are things you can do to really help shape what's seen about you and what's known about you. And then probably a very important one, and one that Yumina said she didn't have when she did her project back in 2016 is, do you have a support network in case of online harassment? Do you have a network of people who you can turn to or you can feel you can lean on so that you can actually discuss and showcase and feel like you're in a safe space if you do unfortunately go through a kind of period of online harassment that will allow you to be able to take stock and be able to step away from it in a way that feels comfortable for you. So to wrap things up, online abuse in arts is a very real thing, and the world that we live in currently, and with current political winds, and like even with the steps that Meta have taken across their platforms, we really do need to, as a sector, really be starting to think about how we protect our comms teams, how we think about the content we put out. And we don't, I am not an advocate for self-censoring, but I am an advocate for being able to tell true stories. And if we're telling true stories and we can be seen as a bastion of truth within the set for audiences, I do believe that will protect us. And what I mean by this is when you're creating your processes or creating your escalation processes, another way you can frame it is, how do I want my audience who are seeing my content, who are engaging with us, who like the stuff we do, how do I want them to feel? Do I want them to feel like they're in a safe space? Do I want them to feel? And when you kind of look at it from that POV, what that allows you to do is it allows you to start to create content and to create narratives and to create communication with your audiences that allows the more positive messaging to come through, that allows more positive questions or questions that are genuine and that are not harassment based to come through, and allows your audience to almost become your barrier because they protect you as much as you protect yourself because of the community you've created in these spaces and the safe space you created for people to ask questions or to be curious, but to also be respectful. The Manchester Art Gallery and Human Experience highlight the stakes that can happen. These are all real life scenarios that took place and not even that long ago. And there is a argument to say that things have got worse since then. So we just have to be careful about what we're doing and really thinking things through and remembering that even when the context is there, the internet is a world where they will cover their ears and shout. We call them the cover their ears and shout brigade. People who will do they're not trying to hear anything or hear no truth. They'll just cover their ears and shout. And then finally, moderation. How do you moderate your content? How do you moderate your responses? How do you let your audiences know what you stand for and what you don't stand for? What are your escalation plans? How do you how is it clear for your audiences or clear for the people who work at your organization where to turn when something goes wrong? And that is it for me. Are there any questions?